You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. This is the premiere program of our new season, and I'm Robin Morgan. We have lots of good listening in store for you, some superb guests for the conversation, and what I think you may find to be thoughtful, provocative commentaries. I do hope you had a good summer, a restorative one in these days of climate change, hurricanes, and major flooding, COVID and all its variants, and the tempest over ending the war in Afghanistan, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, a small but livid percentage of the population hell-bent for dying, thus refusing to get vaccinated or even wear masks while attacking those who do, and other such challenges to life, limb, and sanity. For myself, already double vaccinated, yet wearing a mask in all the right circumstances, I'm awaiting possibly my third or booster shot toward the end of this month. My bedroom was not so mildly flooded during the hurricane, with water dramatically seeping in under the garden doors and positively sluicing down the kitchen windows. We ran around mopping and stuffing small maneuverable bathroom mats into all the cracks. And now we've ordered those sandless sandbags, the ones that inflate naturally when touched by water. Sigh. Might as well get ready for more climate change hurricanes, I'm afraid. In New York City, yet. It did at least make for nice clean floors, however, to look on the bright side. There was a small, if desperate, bright side to the Afghanistan tragedy as well, in that there were so many of us who were engaged in helping women get out, at least those women who could. They included such walking targets as formerly elected representatives in the Parliament and other officials from the previous government, such as it was. There were women lawyers and judges who had put in prison rapists, batterers, child abusers, honor-killing murderers, so-called, and other criminals, all of whom had been released by the Taliban as they surged through the country, and all of whom are filled with misogynistic revenge. This rescue effort continues now, although under the radar. Then, of course, we were hit by the Texas ruling, the one that openly acknowledges its aim to destroy Roe v. Wade and women's rights to reproductive health and freedom. That ruling, now actual law, plus the other Republican-led states that are copycat adopting it, and the Supreme Court's staggering refusal to contest it, is perhaps a fitting close to this summer of discontent. More about this, you can be sure, later in the podcast. My guest for the conversation today is a longtime friend and delicious writer, Alida Brill, social scientist, civil liberties expert, and cheerfully rabid feminist, who not only thinks outside the box, but frequently dismisses the idea of a box with an elegant, airy wave of her hand. So we have lots to get to, and we better get to it by going inside the headlines. Still and always, it comes down to church and state. It comes down to religion. The religious right's position on abortion has been consistently antagonistic, and their very well-financed crusade, state by state as well as federal, has been carefully planned and enacted over all the intervening decades since Roe. Their tactics have ranged from sophisticated lobbying and public relations campaigns to flat-out terrorism, bombing clinics, and murdering medical staff. They've skillfully used this issue as a fundraising tool, as a political wedge to field, fund, and elect candidates, and as a hammer to chip away legislatively at Roe. In 2006, that late, as of that year, fewer U.S. medical schools required proficiency in pregnancy termination, and by then already 86% of all U.S. counties had no abortion provider whatsoever. Now, let's look at religion and what religion actually has to say, real facts about this procedure. The Protestant religious rights position is based primarily on that of the Roman Catholic Church, since the Bible does not forbid the procedure. Furthermore, while there are a few subtle differences among the opposition, one or two groups, for instance, permit some contraceptive use, but a growing number would silence even information about contraception, much less make it available. All of them claim that their religious convictions alone serve the state's interest. So it's relevant indeed to address this subject and replace the untruths, half-truths, and outright lies with simple facts. For instance, 1. There is no mention of abortion as a crime or as a woman's right in the U.S. Constitution. This is because A. There is no mention of women in the Constitution, and B. Abortion was both legal and practiced at the time. 2. There is no mention of abortion in the Bible. There are as many as 600 Mosaic laws, but not one of them comments on abortion. Jewish law traditionally considers that life begins at birth. Exodus 21 refers to miscarriage due to a woman being hurt accidentally as men fight, adding that the culprit should be fined, but if the woman, not the fetus, dies, he should be killed. In general, the Bible is not child-friendly, murdering the firstborn of every Egyptian household, that's Exodus 12, ordering that infants of adversaries should be dashed to pieces, that's Hosea 13, ripped up, that's 2 Kings, slain, 1 Samuel, and eaten, Deuteronomy, and so forth. Psalm 137 proclaims, "Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones." Nice, isn't it? The history of the Roman Catholic Church's position, from which current U.S. anti-choice extremist Christian positions all derive, is not what you think. Today's Vatican finds even the words reproductive health unacceptable in official United Nations documents, in case anyone might construe them to include the already deleted word abortion. And it lobbies effectively, ironically in coalition with Islamists and Protestant fundamentalists, to purge all UN documents of such language. But the Catholic Church's opposition to abortion was not always so absolute. It was only in 1869 that abortion at any stage was made subject to automatic excommunication. This had to do with the Church's position on sexuality, not on respect for fetal life. The Church pretends its position on abortion has been based on a, quote, right to life, and has remained unchanged for 2,000 years. In fact, it has varied continually over the course of history, with no unanimous opinion on the subject at any one time. In 400 CE, Augustine expressed the then mainstream view that early abortion required penance only for the sexual aspect of the sin, not as homicide. 800 years later, Thomas Aquinas substantially agreed. Between 1198 and 1216, Pope Innocent III ruled abortion as, quote, not irregular if the fetus was not, quote, vivified or animated. Animation was considered 80 days for a female and 40 days for a male, although it was never explained how anyone could tell the difference in the womb. Pope Sixtus V forbade all abortions in 1588, but in 1591, Pope Gregory XIV rescinded that order, re-establishing permission to abort up to 40 days for both a male or female fetus. Saint Antoninus, Archbishop of Florence, a 15th century Dominican who wrote a major treatise on abortion, taught that early abortion to save a woman's life was moral. Take that, Scalia. Thomas Sanchez, a 17th century Jesuit, noted that all his Catholic theologian contemporaries justified abortion to save the life of the woman. It was only in 1869 that Pius IX ruled all abortion murder and defined it as an excommunicable sin. Some scholars argue that this edict was issued under pressure from Napoleon III, who was concerned that the birth rate had been dropping and that France might face a serious depletion of soldiers for its wars and for its colonizations. Furthermore, and also contrary to popular belief, the prohibition of abortion is not governed by claims of papal infallibility, which leaves far more room for discussion than is usually assumed. And if this issue isn't governed by infallibility, and if the church position itself has been flexible down through time, and if there is no mention of forbidding abortion in the Bible or in the Constitution, then we might ask just how and why is this issue so explosive in discussing the separation of church and state in the United States Constitution. We have to take a short break here, but don't go away because we'll be back in just a moment with a conversation with Alida Brill, the social critic and author, and we're going to look at why the recent Texas ruling, as not stopped by the Supreme Court, is a huge danger, not just to women, but to the Constitution and to democracy itself. So coming right up. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Alida Brill, my guest for the conversation, is the author of Nobody's Business, The Paradoxes of Privacy, and the editor of A Rising Public Voice, Women in Politics Worldwide. She's the co-author of Dimensions of Tolerance, What Americans Believe About Civil Liberties. The dual memoir, Dancing at the River's Edge, A Patient and Her Doctor Negotiate Life with Chronic Illness, was written together with her longtime physician, Dr. Michael Lockshin. Dear Princess Grace, Dear Betty, The Memoir of a Romantic Feminist, is her most recent book. It received a Silver Nautilus Award. Her essays, articles, and commentaries have appeared in a variety of anthologies, journals, magazines, and other online publications. She is especially an advocate for women and girls with chronic illness, and she has spoken at numerous meetings and conferences, as well as at medical schools and colleges, and on television, radio, and podcasts. Alida, welcome back to Women's Media Center Live. Good to have you back.
Thank you for having me, Robin. It's always wonderful to be on this program.
I have hauled you back on the program because of your stunning book, some 30 years old, that should be republished yesterday. It is so frighteningly timely, called Nobody's Business, The Paradoxes of Privacy, or privacy, as the Brits would say, and a good 2/3 of it is about abortion. You took an interesting and really feminist position that we should not have come in under privacy, although that was the only thing that we could get at the time, But we should have come in under different parts of the Constitution, and I would love to hear you talk about that. Because right now, Klobuchar and all sorts of other senators are trying to draft legislation, and the Houses as well, to get ahead of the crazies in Texas and the other southern states trying to copycat this draconian law.
I have evolved some in the last 30 years, but not all that much. I have nothing but the greatest admiration and praise for what Justice Blackmun did. He couldn't do much, and he did what he could do, but he knew that it wasn't perfect. He crafted something that was pretty crazy when you think about it. He created a little house of privacy that he put women and choice into. But even the decision itself, Robin, was contradictory, because the decision was to be made between a woman and her doctor,
right? Not
a woman and her partner, husband, partner, father of child,
or self,
child. Or why couldn't it just be a woman in her judgment?
Yeah.
And I think I wrote later on, after Dr. Tiller was assassinated, that the notion that women go off to have abortions with as much thought as they go off to have a manicure has been proven over the decades to be untrue.
Of course.
Women take abortion extremely seriously. It is not a pedicure, and they know it. And the fear of the late-term abortions, of course, was a total canard. But, if we consider that the past is prologue, excuse me, to the bard, in 1989, which is the beginning of the first wallop against the Roe v. Wade decision, which is the Webster decision, which is when the states are allowed to allocate resources in favor of childbirth, but not over. And also that's the beginning of the virility testing, which is when we're really in for it. Justice Stevens said in his dissent in Webster that even the acceptance of life begins at conception into the court record violates the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. And that's gotten me thinking a lot after you asked me to be on the program, and I'm kind of zooming around the idea anyway. We need to attack this full on of what this is. This is the end of the secular state. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
We are talking about a theocracy. We are talking about a religious government,
right?
Primarily based on the restriction of woman's personhood. They're not taking away your gun, and from the jump, the right to bear arms has been in there. But we haven't been in there. We have lost completely what the founders cared about, which is an absolute wall between the secular and let's call it the sacred. I don't mind calling it the sacred. That's fine. They believe in that, but that doesn't belong in our government. And I think we have lost any concept for the validity and the importance of what I call a private faith.
Yeah.
What's wrong with a private faith? Pelosi knows how to do it.
Yeah.
President Biden knows how to do it. And certainly the late Governor Cuomo Mario Cuomo knew how to do that.
Yeah. And they're all Roman Catholics.
And Justice Sotomayor knows how to do it.
Of course.
But what we have in charge at the court, we have 6 Roman Catholic justices.
Yeah.
Now we have to move Sotomayor to the side because she knows the difference between private and public. She knows the difference between what is secular and what is quote unquote sacred. But we also have to be very concerned about Gorsuch because he's raised a Catholic.
Yeah.
He's an Episcopalian now, but he's raised a Catholic.
Right.
So what you have on the court is you have the priesthood. I'm sorry, but let's be honest.
It's interesting.
We have, and they dress like priests too, don't they?
Yeah.
I see this as only getting worse unless we take a different approach. And I think the approach needs to be absolutely. And I think Merrick Garland is starting where he says, wait a minute, this is unconstitutional. Yes, it is in many ways, because like it or not, Roe is still the law of the land, however disabled Roe has been. But this is all of the anti-choice. I refuse to say we are not anti-life. We are not
please,
the death squad. We are pro-choice, and they are anti-choice.
That's right.
We have to attack this where I believe they are the most vulnerable, which is this whole maneuver, which continues underground. This is a violation of the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, because the people that are rabidly anti-choice are all coming from a religious point of view.
It's so interesting because in Nobody's Business, in the book, you take on that and every other, in fact, attack argument, because of course for years they've used this as a fundraising tool, as a political tool, you name it. And always under the cloak of religion. But one of the ways that leapt out at me was you were it's the chapter where you're writing about parental consent and how devastating that is, and you say for a girl to activate the privacy guarantee underpinning Roe, she must first cancel it by revealing or exposing the fact of her pregnancy to her parents. Exactly. So, I mean, how does this work? This is insane.
Let's look at it from an even darker perspective.
Yeah.
Some girls are pregnant because they've been raped by a father.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. They are trying to turn the woman into the womb, which is another chapter that you have. It's very simple.
They are turning a woman's womb against her.
Yes.
Yes. One of the articles I wrote after Nobody's Business, and when we first died down a little bit, this Texas bit is going to bring it right to lay the groundwork. The whole fetal neglect thing that began, where you prosecute, and that article I called "Womb versus Woman." We're turning women's bodies against themselves. The right to terminate a pregnancy must be absolute. Yeah. It must be absolute.
And up to the woman concerned. That's just who is a citizen.
Right. It's an absolute right. It is a civil right, not a civil liberty. It has to be accessible. It has to be affordable. And what I find ironic, but not all that surprising, these lunatics that refuse to wear their masks, they're now wearing our old phrase, keep your laws off my body. But most of them are anti-choice.
Oh, I know. So I know.
This is, the irony is not lost on me, but I don't find it amusing.
That's right. And also My Body, My Choice, they use for guns. Yeah. They use to not get vaccinated. Right. They use for all. It just takes your breath away. I mean, it is extraordinary. But one of the things that you point out in the book, there's a whole chapter on the fetus's rights to be aborted, which I found really mind-altering and mind-expanding. You cite, of course, the famous case, the thalidomide case, that had never occurred to me. And then somewhere in the interstices between the book and now, I had forgotten it. But what about the birth of the fetal citizen? If they're going to claim it's such a fetal citizen, then it should have a choice as well. This can only really be resolved by individual female control and autonomy. So how do we make that? Because and I know if we raise that to Congress, they will freak out and say we can't even get away with defending Roe, let alone move it out of privacy into some other what they will consider more radical campaign, the womb versus the woman, etc. What do we propose to them, and how can we get that somehow done? Because the far right is not expecting that. The far right is expecting us to defend Roe and privacy and get lost in all of these, Byzantine corridors. And what if we were to cut straight through that? Well, I guess that's what you're saying, to cut straight through it and say this is a constitutional right. Do you think that we can get Congress to do that?
I don't know, but I do know this, and I want to just back up with something I'm sure you read. It's on front page. When I read this particular article about this young man called Jonathan Mitchell,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, my God, we've been playing checkers. They've been playing chess.
Yeah.
Clerk for Scalia, which is the beginning of the end for women. But this man called Jonathan Mitchell, he is the one that came up with the enforcing. They're calling them bounty hunters. I'm calling them vigilantes. But he came up with the thing that has floored me about this Texas law that nobody stood up against.
The vigilante?
The vigilantes, the bounty hunters. Well, I'm going to call them, the enforcers. It is beyond clever.
Yeah.
It is devious.
Yeah.
And what is clear to me is that they are working quietly and underground. Mm-hmm. And they then pop up with things that, in fact, are very hard to fight. What do? We march. Marching is very important. I believe marching has done a lot. I know there's going to be a big march soon, but it's not enough, Robin.
No,
we have to get as smart and we have to get as inventive as they are. Yeah. We do not have the court with us. I don't know when we're going to have the court.
Well, for one thing, we could start an impeachment process for certain justices, starting with Kavanaugh, and
please.
And moving on from there. In the Earl Warren years, there were lots of it. There was a strong impeach Earl Warren. We don't even think about that. Most Americans don't even know you can move to impeach a justice.
That's right. But I think a quicker thing in terms of capturing what I want to do and what I want to begin to talk about with others is we have to capture American sensibility again. Yeah. Remember that most American citizens are not crazy. You can't win, Robin. Yeah. You can't win against them when you start, when does life begin? This is murder. That you can't win.
All the fetal heartbeat bills, forget about it.
You can't win.
No.
So why try?
Yeah.
Because what they have done on the other side is they have sanctified motherhood.
Yeah.
To the point where we are only symbols. Women are symbols.
Yeah.
We're not people.
Well, we're back to the Middle Ages when the homunculus was in the human being was all in the seed, and women were just the sort of test tube that held it for 9 months.
But I think we have to come out with an absolutely full frontal attack on first of all, the hypocrisy of this. The hypocrisy. They are pro-death penalty. They are pro-guns, but they are anti-choice. Hypocrisy, we're all hypocritical in our lives. Nobody's perfect, but you can't have this level of hypocrisy in our public life and still say that you're a secular state. But I think the way to go is an aggressive, radical, if you will, return to the founders who said, you cannot mix this up.
That's right.
Church and state.
The book, Nobody's Business, should be back in print. Any publishers listening today, because it's vital to this struggle and vital to women's citizenship and vital to the Constitution, even women aside. Thank you.
To the survival of a democracy, not a theocracy.
Yeah, then there's that too. Damn right. Oh, thank you, and thank you for coming on the program and inveighing so articulately about this Texas law. Bless your heart.
Thank you, Robin. Always a pleasure.
Time for another short break, but then I'll return directly with some fighting words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Starting all over again. Those can be fighting words, too. Afghanistan is a country about the size of Texas. Within one 24-hour period, between August 31st and September 1st this year, the Taliban rose to power in both. Seema Samar, Afghan former deputy president and minister of affairs, and the 17-year chair of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, warned that, quote, sustainable peace will not be possible without full and meaningful participation of women as half the population. Without peace in Afghanistan, the problem will reach other countries as well, as history has shown. Close quote. History isn't waiting. It's already on display. I'm not going to descend into wrangling over President Biden's decision to end America's longest 20-year war. I understand, so far as my knowledge of the facts extends, the terrible ironies inherent in his decision, and the rage and grief of some American veterans who are being reassured that their sacrifice was actually for something other than corporate and political power. It was, though not for what anyone has been led to think. I say this because I also believe in the responsibility to protect, or R2P as it's known, the global political commitment endorsed by all member states of the United Nations at the 2005 World Summit in order to address the key UN concerns to prevent genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The doctrine is regarded as a unanimous and well-established international norm over the past 2 decades. The principle of the responsibility to protect is based on the underlying premise that sovereignty entails a responsibility to protect all populations from ethnic cleansing and from human rights violations, and it's based on a respect for the norms and principles of international law, especially the underlying principles of law relating to sovereignty, peace and security, human rights, and armed conflict, all of which, simplistically and erroneously, got misnamed nation-building in Afghanistan. It got misnamed because women remained invisible in the vocabulary. The U.S. never went into Afghanistan because of gender apartheid, though of the agony of women was already impalpable evidence there. We went in after September 11th, 2001, to get al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and once we had done so, we could have left. We didn't leave. But in those intervening years, U.S. forces did foster the creation of a civil society. The sacrifice was not for nothing. In the first press conference held by Taliban spokesmen after they seized Kabul, an independent Afghan journalist stood up and, replying to the statement that Afghans should trust the Taliban, he dared openly ask, "Why, given your past behavior?" And on this last September 6, down the main streets of Kabul in broad daylight, women marched at the cost of their lives, crying out for freedom. It wasn't all for nothing. It was for the real thing. United States and coalition troops birthed an independent media, multiple democratic elections, the peaceful transfer of power, and, most crucially, the future, the education of girls. Some of this progress can never be undone. Almost 40% of Afghan girls can now read. Executions in stadiums, public floggings and amputations, the stoning of women who dare literally show their faces, these hideous acts ceased. This civil society and R2P, however unwittingly performed, is actually worthy of the sacrifice paid by American troops, far worthier than what's been won in other wars this country has fought, to win gold or oil or land. The cost was indeed severe. 47,000 civilians dead, over 2,400 U.S. military, almost 4,000 U.S. contractors, plus $83 billion spent on training and arming the Afghan military, and another $2 trillion just to pay for the health care and disability of veterans, costs that might not peak until 2048. And that's just treasure. Yet it is impossible to seriously conceive of any better use of military power than this, fighting power-hungry, ignorant forces that are fanatically religion-driven, rabidly anti-democratic, viciously punitive, and saturated in the hatred and fear of women. Which brings us to Texas. Nothing against Texans personally, you understand? On the contrary, I firmly believe that given demographic changes as well as good grassroots organizing, Texas will likely turn blue in the next 5 to 10 years. Which might account for the backlash. All this despite those people who wear T-shirts reading, "My body, my choice," so as not to get vaccinated or even wear masks in the pandemic, all the while screaming their support of so-called fetal heartbeat bills. I refer, of course, to SB 8, the ban that Texas passed into law after the Supreme Court refused to intervene. In case you possibly haven't heard, this ban makes it illegal to get an abortion starting at 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is so early that most women don't even know that they're pregnant. What's more, the ban comes with a uniquely vicious twist that cruelly deputizes and even incentivizes anti-abortion ideologues across this country to seek out and punish abortion providers in Texas, as well as any individuals who help patients get care through financial support or transportation. Vigilantes, just like those men who tracked, hunted down, and turned in enslaved people racing toward freedom. And this is accompanied by rewards, bounties to boot. For turning in anyone who helps a woman terminate her pregnancy in Texas, the vigilante gets $10,000 plus legal fees. Does this naturally set a precedent for vigilantism and bounty hunting on other issues? You bet it does. This is appalling. The Supreme Court's refusal to stay the ban, which is now Texas law, is beyond appalling. In her fiery dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor called it, quote, a breathtaking act of defiance. And she pointed out, quote, the court's order is stunning. Presented with an application to enjoin a flagrantly unconstitutional law engineered to prohibit women from exercising their constitutional rights and evade judicial scrutiny, a majority of justices have opted to bury their heads in the sand. Period. Close quote. Even Chief Justice Roberts, with Justices Breyer and Kagan joining, dissented. Quote, the statutory scheme before the court is not only unusual, but unprecedented, close quote, especially in that the case had never even bothered to wend its way up through the courts, where it would have been repeatedly challenged or flatly overruled. Roberts pointedly reserved the right to question severely its unconstitutionality. This unconstitutionality has now been confirmed by President Biden and sued by the Department of Justice. Nevertheless, 5 arch-conservative justices based their decision on what they said was their pitiable inability to rule on, quote, complex and novel antecedent procedural questions presented by the challenges to the law, even while they did grudgingly acknowledge the, quote, serious questions regarding the constitutionality of the Texas law at issue, close quote. You think? Madison Jefferson and the other framers of the Constitution must be not just spinning in their graves, but ready to rise and walk. I hope they're armed with muskets when they do. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, while defending signing this ban into law, which is already being eyed enviously by other states south of the Mason-Dixon line, whined that, gee, a girl still had a full 6 weeks, thus ignoring female biology, and in replying to questions about why no exceptions even for rape or incest victims, ignored incest entirely, but proclaimed that rape was a crime and he would get rapists off all Texas streets. Also ignoring the reality that most rapists are not strangers wandering the streets, but are familiar to their victims. It's the kind of breathtaking, willful ignorance reminiscent of, say, Mullah Omar, who, you may remember, once declared that when a woman ate a cucumber or a banana, she was visually performing a sinful act punishable by stoning. So here we go again. The Afghan Taliban and the Texas Taliban. America's 2 longest wars. Because the religious forces of the right wing have never stopped their assault since Roe was first decided, in their relentless attempts to erode and destroy a woman's basic human right over her own body. It was Texas, back in 1973, whose ban on abortion was the basis for Roe v. Wade in the first place, a ban that was declared unconstitutional when Roe was first passed. And Texas will have to be taught the same lesson again. But the contemporary women's movement is very different from what it was in its infancy in 1973, both at home here and around the world. Now it's powerful. This time nobody is withdrawing. This time nobody is settling. There will be marches, to be sure. A major women's march for women's reproductive lives is scheduled for October the 2nd. But it won't stop there. There will be massive demonstrations, if necessary, mass acts of civil disobedience. There will be new legislation enshrining this right in the Constitution. There will be public protests until the Equal Rights Amendment is finally passed. There will be campaigns nationwide to impeach some justices who should never have been appointed or confirmed in the first place. We will stop at nothing this time. Because an issue larger even than this specific and basic human right is at stake. The final, unequivocal, truly democratic inclusion of women and women's rights in the vocabulary. That vocabulary sings in the Constitution. That vocabulary sings in democracy itself. That vocabulary is one we share here in the United States with our sisters in Afghanistan and around the world. Our homegrown Taliban yearn to return us to the Stone Age, to join their Afghan brothers, and they believe that they are nearing the triumphant end of their long campaign to do so. But Afghan women took to the streets, risking their lives and wearing the audacity of their courage. As for us, we have only just begun. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live, and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.